Hey everyone, this is Brad Hughes, School Principal and Chief Encouragement Officer from Ontario, Canada. And I've got some good news for you. You found the Good News, Brad News podcast, amplifying stories of heart-led educators moving from positive intention to action. Great people like you, improving kids' lives through service, connection, and finding the fun. So glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey everyone, glad you could make it. Thanks for joining me for the Good News, Brad News podcast. I am your host, Brad Hughes, and as you settle in and get comfortable for episode 17, I'm reminded that back in 1973, renowned tenor Luciano Pavarotti received a record 17 curtain calls following a performance at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. Now, you won't find me attempting the 9 consecutive high Cs Pavarotti effortlessly pulled off, but I am hoping this podcast leaves you eager for an encore and calls you back again and again. And I'm eager to raise the curtain for my guest today, educator and illustrator Kristin Wiens. Now, if you're on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, you've probably seen or saved any number of Kristin's incredible infographics and daily doodles. Kristin uses the power of visuals to share and anchor her influence as an inclusion coach in British Columbia, Canada. Kristin is a parent, a speaker, a consultant, and the author of a beautiful book called The Gratitude Jar. Kristin has also partnered with activist and renowned Canadian musician Raffi to develop an online course on the 9 principles of child honoring. Now, Kristin and I discuss a number of things near and dear to both of us, including how the well-being of children is inseparable from the well-being of critical adults in their lives, how positioning the needs of the underserved at the center of our work benefits everyone, and the transformative potential of reframing life's joys and challenges through a self-reg lens. A little background. Broadly speaking, self-regulation refers to the ability to monitor and manage one's physiology, emotions, thoughts, and behaviors towards desired results. Dr. Stuart Shanker's research and teaching about self-reg promotes a rich, embodied understanding of how stress promotes or interferes with well-being, loving relationships, and learning for both children and adults. Now, stress is anything that causes our brains and bodies to burn energy to interact with our environments. Growing in self-reg calls us to refine our stress awareness and to reframe what we see and experience through that lens, how stresses can either promote or interfere with learning and living. Dr. Shanker and Dr. Susan Hopkins of the Mehrit Center are teaching a growing network of self-reggers to recognize and reduce harmful stressors, consider how visible and hidden stresses contribute to dysregulation, and, importantly, to distinguish between so-called misbehavior and stress behavior. Self-reg challenges us to rethink how we habitually interpret and respond to people in distress. It encourages us away from behaviorist and punitive approaches to seek the underlying causes of behavior, what behavior might be telling us about stresses and unmet needs. As we are better equipped to monitor and reduce harmful stressors upstream, we allow human capacity to blossom. We become facilitators of innate competence and capability. That's right. When we encounter distress and seek to understand and reduce it, when we soothe and connect rather than withdraw and isolate, when we leverage relationships as priceless protective and restorative mechanisms, we allow others to become who they are meant to be. For Kristin Wiens, the key is coming back again and again to the world-changing potential of children and the adults that serve them. And it really shows. I know you'll enjoy getting to know Kristin today, and after hearing her story, you'll be eager to connect with her too. So, here's my interview with Kristin Wiens today on the Good News, Brad News podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back once again to the Good News, Brad News podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest, an author, an educator, a consultant, an illustrator, and a fellow self-regger. This is Kristin Wiens. Kristin, welcome to the Good News, Brad News podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
As we get started, could you please tell our listeners about yourself? Tell us about your different personal, professional, community roles. What do we need to know about Kristin Wiens?
I'll start with my role I love the most. I'm a mom of 2 kids who are now adults, and that's been, I think, by far my favorite role, even though I love them all. So I have a son and a daughter. My daughter is also an inclusion teacher, and so there's crossover between personal and professional roles. We also teach an educational assistant program together, so I can't believe how fortunate I am that I get to spend such quality time with my adult child in a really meaningful role, professional role. And my son is my youngest, and he's just started in his new career as an occupational therapist. And so that's neat too, that there's definitely crossover there. Within the school district, I am an inclusion coach. So I work out of the district office in inclusive education services. And my role focuses on professional learning opportunities. And again, I just love the job and the role and that opportunity to spend that kind of time with my colleagues and learn from them so much and try in a small way to support them in their journey as well. It's exciting for me to work for that district. It's the district I grew up in. So I will often answer the question, how long have you been in the district? I'll say, well, I started when I was 4 years old, and I seem to just not be leaving. So that's very cool. I like that. And both my kids graduated from there. So definite roots. Over the years, I've also done some work with Raffi and the Raffi Foundation around his work with child honoring, and that's been incredible. Together, we designed an online course that covers the 9 principles of child honoring, which is a beautiful philosophy that he created. I'm also known for my illustrations, which is just something I do mostly on my own, although I connect it with other people's work. With my illustrations, I really love highlighting other people's good works and thoughts, and that's where a lot of the self-reg comes in. And the beginning of all that was that I started creating those for my adult students in our EA program as a way to kind of walk the talk, because I'm always talking about the power of visuals. So I started creating those, and that's taken a life of its own, which I love.
Kristin, it was you and your daughter that together created an EA program for your district. What characterizes this EA program that you created?
It was such an opportunity to kind of really reflect on what it is that I believe, what do I think is the most important philosophies and skills and knowledge for people to have coming into this field, which is really important and really challenging. I had already started a lot of my deeper learning with the Mehrit Center and self-reg, so that became a really critical piece. The beginning philosophies that really set the tone are, we talk about the importance of relationship. We hear that, but what does that really mean? We also include a lot of growth mindset, self-compassion, because what we found was adult learners, often coming mid-career or they've been out of school for a while, could be quite critical of themselves and anxious and even fearful of this new learning journey. So that was really an important piece, I think, for them as students. And then they, of course, would take that and pass that on to their future students. And mindfulness is a key foundational piece. They all work together, which is such a beautiful thing, that all the concepts we have learned, it doesn't matter where we introduce a concept, it's either going to set the stage for something or reinforce something that we've already talked about, because all these ideas are intertwined. Those foundational concepts really set the stage for a deep dive into self-reg and the whole brain. Like, I just love learning about the brain and that need for safety, which then connects to mindfulness and relationships. That we just go around in these circles and add to the knowledge. The history of inclusion and where we've come from, like start with our why. Why is it that we would even spend so much time on this, and the importance of that? From there, we build on universal design strategies for anxiety and for executive function and self-reg. It's quite exciting how they slowly start to just build into this complete puzzle. And then on top of it, the amount of learning that I do every year, because I get the chance to sit with these topics in such meaningful ways and get new perspectives every year. Our students are adults, so they bring so much previous knowledge and experience, and it just adds to our learning. So it's a real win-win situation as far as the opportunity that the program presents to us. They have a career waiting for them, so they are really keen to learn. So it's about the most perfect classroom situation that I could ever be in. So it's a big commitment on our part, but that's what makes it. I mean, if you bring the self-reg lens in, not all stress is bad stress. This is definitely a stress. It's an additional piece of the work, but what a joy. It's that good stress. It energizes us. Yeah, this is actually a real addition to my life and energizing. So yeah, it's quite cool.
You've written that your why is to create spaces where everyone has a sense of belonging. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that thread of connection between belonging and child honoring that you opened our discussion with.
It's a beautiful connection. And it is definitely a thread that runs through my life. And it's what adds such joy and such richness and meaning to it. Raffi really speaks so passionately about seeing the whole child and children deserving to be seen and heard and respected. But then coupled with that, the responsibility and the opportunity that we all have to create a world that's better for the very young. I mean, he's so passionate about connection. So that idea of it's the young child that connects us all across the globe. We all have young children. We have babies, and we love those babies, and they mean the world to us. And so starting at that place where we can all agree, this is a precious life in front of us. We all have that in common. And so together, how do we create a world which allows children to be seen, be heard, be connected to both their family and the caring community around them? And from there, we will see them flourish. And then just what a beautiful cycle that is he talks about turn this world around. And that's the way we do it, is through connection, and especially those early years where the foundation is being laid about, to bring it back to self-reg, that neuroception. Is this a safe place? If you're being loved, seen, heard, respected from a young age, then that gets programmed into your brain that, this is a good place to be. And not to say it's a perfect place, because on top of that just lays that foundation from which you can learn to navigate the ups and downs of the world. But to give every child around the world a solid, loving foundation, imagine where the world would be in just a generation, where it would be.
I think of Raffi's continued contributions to Canadian and worldwide well-being through music and advocacy. And you do incredible advocacy for spaces of belonging and for access to learning for so many. And one aspect of that is through visual communication. You don't just talk the talk in terms of the value of visual communication in educational spaces, but you walk the walk. Many of our listeners may have come to know you through the visuals that you provide. Tell us about the connection between the visuals you promote to inspire and help others to carry that forward.
I'm pleased to hear you say I walk the walk, because some of the first ones that I created were because I caught myself talking about these things a lot. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, Kristin, you are talking about visuals all the time. Let's see. Can you put it in practice? Let's create some visuals about visuals. I laugh about that because it was like this light bulb moment. And definitely, I learned all that from our speech and language therapists and our occupational therapists, who were the first people that I heard really promoting that and explaining it in a way that I just connected with me. I'm like, wow, this is a game changer. And watching our students really find value in having this visual in front of them, it's permanent. It's there. So I often say words have wings. We say our words and then they disappear. And so when we talk to a child or an adult, we say things and they disappear. Visuals, we say, are anchors. They stay, and you can reference them again. You can look at them again. If you have questions, you can clarify. So it was created mainly for our students. And then from then I thought, well, I've already invested the time in this. I may as well share more. I try to get a big idea and bring out just the essence of that in a way that it fits on one page. And then I add color and some cartoons and hope that makes it less threatening. sometimes when we bring up these ideas and we're making a suggestion, it can feel like we're criticizing or being judgmental. And so I kind of say to other educators, let me bring up the topic. It's going to feel less judgmental, especially if it's colorful, especially if it has a cartoon on it, especially if it's only one page. And let me help you start those meaningful conversations. If I'm creating one of those kind of more of the along the infographics that I'm trying to put information, because of course I now and I do my daily doodles where they sometimes have some depth to them, but they're often just more frivolous than some of these ones that have a lot of content. And so when I'm making the ones with content, that's really what I'm thinking. What are the key elements? And learning along the way, like, or less is often more, this isn't about teaching everything. It's about trying to have conversations. And then it's just been so gratifying to hear like people saying and sending me pictures of their bulletin boards or their fridges or where they're posting these things as reminders and how they're using them. I'm just so grateful for the support, the encouragement, and people sharing the work.
In your most recent doodles, I've noticed a shift from graphic to more organic and a little bit of a shift between clinical or professional to personal. And I want to gently challenge your characterization of those personal doodles as frivolous, because I really think that they may serve to restore and energize you so you can keep doing the great work that you're doing. So what do you think? Is there a role of illustration for just pure enjoyment and recharging those batteries when they're low?
Absolutely. And that certainly is serving that in my life. So, and thank you for that very kind and gentle challenge. And it's interesting you would say personal, because the feedback has been how encouraging people, like, I needed that today. Like, they take the message on a very personal level rather than the more professional, even though that connects on a personal level too. But definitely it's more of I needed that message today. And sometimes even one this week, I think the caption for me was note to self, and I think it was rest or something. Like, so sometimes it is extremely personal. And even this last week, they've been very simple and very repetitive. And that was me going, I'm feeling the pressure. Oh, that it's like, it can be simple. This is about a restorative practice. If I make a commitment to create something every day, I'm bound to have to loosen up, to let the last bits of that perfectionist go, if that's part of us. I'm working on it. There's a little bit of pressure because I've challenged myself. I've invited myself to do it every day. So there are some times when I'm like, but the structure of that has meant that and creativity does feed my soul. It is good for me. So within that bit of structure, I have consistently had something creative in my life. Yes, you hit it perfectly when you said it's one of my restorative practices is keeping that creativity in my life.
And so highly connective for everyone they reach, and then restorative or even doubly restorative for you, knowing that your work is reaching others and helping move their day forward positively, even in small ways.
Yeah, what a boost that is, when somebody says, I just needed this today. It's like, oh, connection, another human being. That's just like me. That's how I was feeling today. And somebody's reaching out and saying, just like me. It's like, isn't that what we want for everyone, that they look in the world and they see someone saying, just like me, and that's just like me. And so that sense of belonging, that sense of connection. Yeah, absolutely.
And that sense of belonging and connection, I think you'll agree, has maybe never been needed more when we think about the different compounding and overlapping stresses of living and working and maintaining community within a pandemic. I'm so grateful that you and your illustrations and your work continue to be so connective for so many.
I really do think it's an amazing time with technology to be connecting in really positive ways. So, I mean, huge kudos to the educational community, because it's a positive space there where we're connecting. And it's just, a privilege to be connected with amazing people.
There are many professionals, some new to the role, who are taking on this important work of inclusion coach, recognizing that the spaces in which we live, work, and learn need to be challenged and transformed to make sure that they are as welcoming for everyone. I'm wondering under what conditions you think the role of inclusion coach might transform or evolve, or perhaps maybe no longer be necessary.
Well, isn't that the dream, right? When you think of universal design and all means all, it would be lovely if that were the case. And that's the direction we're heading in. Even just the language shifts. We were special ed teachers, then we were integration support teachers. Now we're inclusion support teachers and inclusion coaches. So all of that speaks to that. And then you bring that universal design for learning, which is what we're promoting. Ideally, we wouldn't have those distinctions. And it's exciting in our district as far as what I think our next steps is our curriculum department, which has renamed themselves Transformative Ed. So interesting that the word you used. Their department and our Inclusive Education Services department, we've always collaborated, but more intentionally now, offering workshops kind of in conjunction and talking about how we look at that crossover across all departments. And so I see that breaking down of those silos being really necessary. A big dream is for our university programs to shift and include more of understanding about where we have come from in an inclusive, our journey from segregation. I think a lot of people don't really know what it was like and where we were not long ago. So that helps with that why, right? It's motivating. So as the generations go on, we need to keep that piece of history relevant. So it's like, this is why, because this is where we were, and let's celebrate where we're going. Because I also see young teachers coming out. The profession is a challenging profession. Education, it's difficult. It's awesome. It's rewarding. And it's got a lot of challenges. And so I really am concerned for our young teachers because inclusion is not optional. And yet I feel that it's our responsibility to help them be equipped for that. And if they're not, it's frustrating. And I think we lose people like, oh, I tried inclusion, it didn't work. It's like, well, then it needed to be different, And so that is my concern, and that we already are in a field where burnout is very real. I want all people to flourish, but especially our teachers. They're with our young people. Their young people are watching them. And so I love that self-reg says it starts with you. Take it personally, like that we need to be bringing it into our own lives and it will help us. So I think that's part of it. I love that our district has a very strong focus on looking at how we can support educator well-being, staff well-being, and I am grateful for that. And I see that across the country that's becoming a priority. I think that's a really important step in this. And so there's that piece, and I think part of that piece is also supporting educators in really valuable professional development so that they feel confident and excited. I'm a huge fan of Shelley Moore and her work, and sometimes in her conversation, like I know one of her kind of goals is if you really understood this and the richness that inclusion and diversity offers to your classroom, it wouldn't be like, oh, I got enough on my plate. It would be like, sign me up. Like, so as far as like, yeah, we wouldn't be talking about inclusive education. We'd just be talking about education. And when we talked about diversity in our classrooms, we'd be like, there's not enough diversity in here. And so, I mean, that's that big dream. And I think the small steps along the way are just educator well-being and professional development, because I've never met a teacher who doesn't want to include everyone in their class.
What's next for you? What's exciting you as you continue to dream big and to hope big?
One of the newer things that I really see great potential in is mindful self-compassion. I think as a society, we tend to be hard on ourselves, educators, even more than most, I think. And so I see some of my colleagues being quite hard on themselves. So we've started incorporating more of this and seeing a shift there, be kinder to themselves. I saw them be gentler, and the difference that made for everyone in their world. So that's a piece that excites me for sure. And Shelley Moore's work really excites me. And then, of course, the Mehrit Center and the work that they're doing. I hope to continue to collaborate with them and highlight their amazing work.
Kristin, how can our listeners reach you and best stay connected with all of the things that you're doing?
Any graphics I do and any daily doodles, they get posted both on Instagram. So that's Kristin.Wiens, and Twitter, which is at KWiens62.
Kristin, it's been wonderful talking with you, and I want to wish you continued success in all the great ways you continue to connect and to inspire. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing and for making this connection happen.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Good News, Brad News podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment wherever you found this podcast. And if you like what you heard, please recommend Good News, Brad News to a friend. And please hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at Brad, BRAD, _Hughes, HUGHES. I look forward to hearing from you and to reconnecting with you on our next episode. Until then, get out there and do amazing things.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.